Chapter 19, Vegas Nights. We rode from California to Vegas, 40 cars deep. We were on our way to the Tyson fight. Right before we crossed the state line, we stopped at a restaurant. Some college dudes at the restaurant started talking crazy to Pac on some gangbanging shit. They had no idea that there were a bunch of the homies outside. When one of the dudes came out of the restaurant, the homies rolled up on him. It was like a scene from an action movie. People were being knocked into their places for talking crazy to Pac. After the chaos, we all jumped in our cars and continued on our trip. When we were about 2 hours away, one of the producers, Damon Thomas, had an accident and flipped his Viper over 7 times. With so many cars in the caravan, we had no clue about the accident until we made it to Vegas. When we got to Vegas, we checked into the Luxor Hotel. Later on that day, we went to one of the other hotels to gamble. When we were on our way out, Pac noticed one of the guys that had tried to get his chain from one of the homies. His name was Orlando Anderson. Puffy had a bounty out for death row medallions and he was paying $75,000. The would-be thieves knew that they were going to have to hurt or kill someone in order to get the chain. When Orlando realized that we knew who he was, he tried to run. That's when all hell broke loose. The fight was so big and people were running from everywhere. The security guards ran toward us deep as hell, but they were too scared to come close to us. We rushed the exit and left the building. When we made it back to the hotel, we got dressed to head out to the strip. It was always the best part of the trip. We would all dress up. It was like Suge was Tony Soprano, and we were his guys. I was almost dressed when Suge asked me to meet him and Pac downstairs. I got on the elevator thinking I was clean as hell, but as soon as I got off, one of the hotel staff told me that there was something on the back of my pants. When I looked down, I couldn't tell if it was ketchup, hot sauce, coffee, or what. It was everywhere. I told Suge that I needed to get some more clothes. I didn't want it looking like I had shitted on myself. Suge told me that I had better run over to the mall and grab something, and then meet them at the fight. I took a cab over to the mall, but everything was closing early. I happened to find a store where I was able to replace my pants, but the problem was, their seamstress had already left for the day. I was always clean. There was no way I was showing up with unhemmed pants. I took a page out of the grandmother's playbook and ran to Woolworth's to get some fabric tape. I went back to the room and ironed my pants. When I was done, they looked like they had been custom tailored. When I got in the car, I called Suge. He said to me, "Shit, you might as well go straight to the club." Tyson knocked this fool out in 1 round. When I arrived at Club 662, it was cracking. All of the A-listers were there. It was where Tyson came to party. People came out to Vegas just to come to Club 662, even if they didn't have tickets to the fight. I had been at the club for about 2 hours when one of the homies came in and said, "Suge and Pac just got smoked on the strip." I was tripping out. I immediately went into panic mode. Security was all over me trying to see where I was going. They were watching my every move. When we got down to the strip, it was very crowded. People were everywhere. One of the homies chirped us and told us that they were at the University Medical Center. Someone said that they had been killed. They'd just been shot. They straight, another homie said. I didn't know what to believe. Suge was a father to me, and Pac was like a brother. I was inconsolable. My mind was on getting to the hospital. I had to see them for myself. When I got there, everyone was in the emergency room. I was shaking and crying. I can't explain the feeling I had. I thought they were dead. We waited at the hospital until late into the night. Suge fared better than Pac. He ended up signing himself out of the hospital after suffering a graze to his head. Pac was in bad shape. When Suge went into Pac's room and saw him on life support, I think he went into shock. It was a lot to take in. He was lost for words. His eyes were different. He was lost. Everyone left the hospital for the night and went back to the hotel. When we got back to the house in Vegas, Suge wanted everyone to leave. He wanted to be alone. Tupac was like a little brother to Suge too. Ever since his release from jail, we had been inseparable. I was scared. I had been acting like this grown-ass man, but I was still a kid. I thought we were untouchable. Suge was like Superman to me, and now he was falling apart, I was falling apart, and Pac was on his deathbed. We were just together laughing like we always would. All this flashed into my mind as I prayed for a miracle. I remembered how I would always try to beat Pac to the car whenever we were about to roll out somewhere. This dude and I used to play shotgun. Whoever got there first would get the front seat. Pac always won. I would have to sit behind him because nobody could sit behind Suge. At the hospital, the reporters and paparazzi were in full force. It seemed that they would do anything to get a story. They wanted the story so bad that they sent in young kids to listen and write about what was going on. Everyone in the camp had to become security at that point because we had to be sure that no one would be able to breach our security. We were sure to protect Pac against anyone who might want to bring more harm to him. We had to put people out left and right. Pac was drifting away, but you couldn't even tell it because Pac was a fighter. We expected him to pull through. None of us could imagine life or death row without Pac. As the days went by, people would call in threats to the hospital. They would say things like they knew where his bed was and that they were going to come and finish the job. We ended up parking a U-Haul truck on the side of his room just to give him some kind of protection. He was on life support and could not be moved. We would take turns walking around the hospital, and if anything looked suspicious, we were on top of it. Sometimes we would gather around Pac's mother and pray. One of those times, his mom asked me to sing. I sang one of the songs that he always liked to hear me sing. I was born by the river in a little tent, just like the river. I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. As I was singing, tears rolled down his face. I knew he had heard me. He knew that we were there in the room with him. When we would ask Pac if he knew who we were, he would kick his feet. But perhaps it was our imagination. We wanted him to survive, but he was drifting away. We prayed and cried and cried and prayed. His mother was one of the strongest women I'd ever met. She would just smile and pray. "My baby is gonna be all right," she'd say. On Pac's 5th day in the hospital, I went to pray for him. As I prayed and sang in his ear, he again shook his feet. I still had hope. I thought Pac was going to be okay. I stayed with him till the early morning. Friday the 13th, I was sleeping in my room at the Luxor Hotel after being at the hospital all night. I was awakened to the sound of hotel security and one of the homies banging on my door. It had to be about 5 o'clock in the morning. I opened my door in a panic. Pac was gone. I ran down to valet, and as soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, the radio station played. I shed so many tears. The fans were crying. The DJ was crying. I was crying, but I was still in doubt. Pac can't be dead, I thought. When I pulled up at the hospital and saw thousands of people crying and holding up signs, I knew it was real. I jumped out in the middle of the street with the car still in drive. When I got to the door, the nurse was standing there waiting. "I'm sorry about Mr. Shakur, and sorry for your loss," she said. I fell right to the floor. Security picked me up and took me back to the hotel where everyone was meeting. It felt like the world was standing still. Everyone was in a daze. We were sitting around talking about arrangements when Afeni said, "I don't want nobody standing over him." She paced the floor back and forth for a while, and then she stopped. "Go on, Peacock, spread your wings," she said. I can still hear her voice. Afeni turned to us and said that she would make arrangements for Tupac to be cremated. I instantly threw up all over the floor where Suge was standing. It literally made me sick to my stomach to know that my brother's body would be cremated. I felt like Pac would have wanted his service to be like a concert. That's what the lyrics said. "Have a party at my funeral. Let every rapper rock it." "Man, you know we have to go with what she wants," Suge said. Suge still didn't want to be around anybody. He had completely shut down. It was another one of the saddest days in entertainment history. A few days after Pac's urn was delivered, the video director of I Ain't Mad at Cha sent Suge a version of the video. No one had ever seen the video besides the editors, not even Pac. I was sitting there watching this video where we were acting like we were in heaven. In the video, the Red Fox lookalike spoke to Tupac, saying, "Man, I've been struggling trying to get in here a long time. You're gonna have to earn your way. I sure hope you can make it." At this point, I was just coming into adulthood. I was signed to a label called Death Row and acting in a video where I'm acting out life after death. To know that Pac was gone and that I was pretty much the only person in the video living, it felt like a premonition. I had been too close to death to not see the connection. I was supposed to be in the car that night. Had it not been for the grace of God, I might have been shot down too. The things we speak, what we name ourselves, we have to live under. I began to wonder if I was serving a sentence. None of the artists from the label came to Vegas to show their respects, and the ones that were there swiftly returned to Cali. I think Tupac's death scared the shit out of everybody. Suge and I stayed in Vegas for about a week longer. During that time, I only saw him once or twice. When I did see him, all we could do was cry and talk about Pac. We were left with so many questions. We didn't know how we could move on, or if we'd ever recover. Serving time on death row was getting harder with Pac gone. It seemed like we were falling apart. When we left Vegas, we went back to LA for a while. After Pac was killed, people were bolder. Death row was no longer untouchable. We started getting threats, so Suge moved me to my Chelle's old place in Calabasas. Not long after the move, Suge had us fly to Compass Point, Bahamas, to wrap up the Christmas on Death Row album. We were trying to get things back moving in the right direction, but it seemed like everything was working against us. Being in the Bahamas provided only a brief distraction from the hurt, heartache, and agony that was still lingering. Back in the States, they were investigating Suge for allegedly stomping the guy that he was in an altercation with at the hotel. They never questioned Orlando Anderson about his whereabouts during the shooting. They overlooked all of that and did everything that they could to prosecute Suge. To me, it didn't seem like they had any validity, but they definitely made their case. While we were in the Bahamas, I woke up one day and realized that I couldn't get up. I couldn't get out of bed. For weeks, I was seeing a back specialist there. After about a month in the Bahamas, I was still experiencing back pains, and I was being pushed around in a wheelchair. I had to have people help me get in and out of the shower. I was almost helpless. The pain was becoming unbearable. Shug came into the studio one day and saw me lying down in the booth recording the Christmas song. He immediately told everyone to take the rest of the night off. Shug, his barber, Reggie Lamb, and I went back to the house that Shug was renting while we were there. Shug's house was on the ocean. Hoping that the salt water would heal my back, we went out for a soak. There were these large rocks in the water that protected us from the sharks that swam on the other side. We drank liquor until everyone was pissy drunk, and then we prayed. We prayed to God all night long. There was a Muslim guy there who even prayed to God in Arabic. Shug had a lot of things facing him. That night in the water was the last time we talked like that. The next day, Shug came by the studio and gave me his death row chain, which was worth more than everyone's chains together. He took it off, put it around my neck, and told me to hold it down. When he left the studio, I thought he was going to the villa, but about an hour later, Kevin Lewis called a meeting. He asked me to pray before he began to talk. Kevin told us that Shug was on his way back to LA to turn himself in. There had been a warrant issued for his arrest. They made sure that he was gone and on the plane before they told me, because Shug didn't want me to know what was going on. We stayed at Compass Point for another week. Shug was all over the news. Early one morning, the police came into the studio and told us that we had to leave. They escorted us to the van without giving us a chance to go back and retrieve our belongings. They wanted us to go directly from the studio to the airport, and that's what we did. We left behind our clothes, shoes, and personal items. All we knew was that they no longer wanted us there. I was still having problems moving and was still in a wheelchair. Reggie Lamb had to push me around everywhere. We flew into Miami, but were stranded there because there had just been a hurricane. We had to sleep in the airport that night. My back pain was so bad that I cried all night long. As soon as we got back to LA, I went to the hospital. I had no feeling in my legs. I was basically paralyzed. I couldn't get out of bed. I needed help using the bathroom and doing the things I was used to doing on my own. I had been in the hospital for 2 months and hadn't heard anything from Shug. I was in therapy, working to get better before my birthday arrived. I would tell the doctor that I was okay, even though I was still in pain. It was weird not to hear from Shug because we normally talked every day. He was in prison, but it was not like him to cease all communication. At the least, he would send a message through someone else, but there were no messages, no notes, and no phone calls. I knew that he had been in communication with someone, but I couldn't understand why he wouldn't talk to me. When he gave me his chain, it felt like a father-son moment, but at this point, I didn't know what to think. His people were telling me Shug, he could be a pain in the ass. The fact that he had millions behind him only further exacerbated things. This was the beginning of niggas having money outside of sports. It was new, and I think it made them nervous. Shug had money, and he had power, and they wanted him off the streets. They were more focused on taking him down than solving Pac's murder. It was a tough time for me. Our chain was broken. I had lost both Tupac and Shug. Chapter 20, Stranded on Death Row. The Christmas album was slated to be released a month or so after I was discharged from the hospital. We finished all of the songs and made the release date. With Shug locked up, I knew that things were going to change, but I didn't know that they would change the way they did. Before Shug went to jail, he always made sure that I had plenty of money to do holiday shopping for my family. He always made sure that I was good when I went home to Chicago for Christmas. This year was vastly different. It was the beginning of Death Row Records' demise. Tupac was gone, Shug was locked up, Snoop had left the label, and all of the other artists seemed to be doing their own thing. The studio was beginning to feel like a desert. I was still there every day recording and hanging out because the studio was my element. I would be there at least 15 hours out of the day. With the transitions, it gradually became more difficult for me to gain access to the studio. I went from people calling me Mr. Knight to being treated like a stepchild. The people who took over had no respect for the previous structure. They were on their own stuff, and I was left to figure things out for myself. One morning, I woke up to go to one of Shug's court dates. When I got there, Norris, Shug's brother-in-law, said to me, "I need that chain before you leave today." I cursed his ass out and kept it moving. Shug had left the chain in my possession. I felt responsible for it. I didn't want to betray his trust by just handing it over. I was trying my best to be the man he had taught me to be. But Norris didn't give up. He called me just about every day. The next time I saw him in court, I gave him the chain. When court was over, Shug turned around and nodded his head as the sheriffs escorted him out. After attending a few more court sessions, we found out that Shug would not be given a bond. He had a long list of charges brought against him. The judge said that the fight in Vegas was a violation of his probation and that he would be looking at 7 to 8 years. When I heard this, I sat in the back of the court and cried like a baby. When the people back at the office found out about this, things went from bad to worse. They started giving me my $210 monthly salary late. I was supposed to be paid on the first of the month, but they would pay me in the middle of the month, if at all. Mikkel was handling Shug's business. Before Shug went to jail, we were cool. but once he was locked up, she turned into a different person. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if she was the reason Snoop left. She started cutting off our checks and not returning phone calls, just doing mean shit. She was getting paid 100,000 cars a month to run things, but I guess that wasn't enough for her. It was like she was trying to bring death row down, and I'm not sure if Shug had any idea what was happening. Her actions were extreme. She'd sign checks upside down so the bank wouldn't cash them. When I finally got through to her people, they told me that McKeel wanted to know if I had saved any money. She cared nothing about Shug's guardianship or my contract, which entitled me to a minimum of 2K per month. After my car caught a blowout, they started playing games about giving it back to me. To make matters worse, our utilities were turned off because I couldn't pay the bill. When I called the office to tell them about my situation, they told me that they would get around to it. I knew not to hold my breath. I had no car, no lights, and the feds were coming to my house with questions about Shug. We got our things together and went back to Chicago for the holidays. When I arrived in Chicago, I had gifts, but not as many as I usually had. I had the little money Trina had helped me save, but I couldn't party like I usually did when I came home. I was in Chicago for about 2 weeks when I called my house in LA to check the voicemail. When I dialed the number, a girl answered the phone, so I hung up immediately because I thought I had dialed the wrong number. I picked up the phone and called again. This time, she said hello with an attitude. I'm trying to call my voicemail and I keep getting you, I said. The voice on the other line was Stormy, Shug's baby mama. She had moved into my house. The office didn't tell you? She asked. I immediately hung up from her and called the office, but I couldn't reach anyone because the office was closed for the holidays. I ended up getting in contact with Shug's assistant. As soon as he answered the phone, I went off. Roy had no idea what I was talking about. Let me try to get Norris on the phone. I'll call you back, he said. But I didn't hear back from anybody until I was on my way back home around the first of the year. With Trina and Ashley back home in Chicago, I went back to LA to try to sort things out. As soon as I got there, I went to the office. I stayed there all day, into the evening. I ended up staying at my homie Young Buck's spot for a few weeks. When I went to Shug's shop to check on my car, I saw that it was in the work stall. When I tried to get it, they gave me the runaround about it. I never saw my car again after that day. I couldn't get through to Shug, and the people in the office were treating me like shit. I went off on them so much that they started sending me to voicemail. After many months of living with other people, being denied my car and housing, I started to believe that Shug was mad at me, but I hadn't done anything to warrant his silence. Whenever anyone had any words about him, I always defended him. He had taken care of me. Even when I was broke and hungry, I remained loyal. We were so close that a lot of people had a problem with it. As his son, I had a front row seat to everything. Now that they had some power, they did everything they could to keep me away from him. I knew that someone had said something that was off. When I would see Michelle, she would be so rude to me for no reason. When she was on the bottle and drunk, I used to help Shug get her out of the car and into the bed, but I guess those times didn't matter. She was a woman in power and she didn't care who she ran over to maintain it. I didn't know what move I was going to make. My grandmother was worried. She would tell me to come back home. With my money getting low and the pressure of everything else weighing heavy on me, I did just that. Going back to the Chi was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make. As soon as I got there, everybody wanted to know what was going on. They wanted to know why I wasn't in Cali anymore. I wasn't partying at all. I was trying to save every piece of change I had. I would spend some time talking to Pac's mother, Afeni, and she would tell me that things would get better. She said that she was having some challenges getting Pac's estate in order. Casey, Jojo, and Darius were some of the few people who treated me the same. Darius even fed me on a few occasions. He was still family. But Ray J and some of my other Hollywood friends stopped answering my calls. Moments like this were the very reason we formed committee. Now he was acting as if he didn't know me. After I left LA, I heard that he was going around telling people that I was in Chicago, strung out on drugs. That couldn't have been further from the truth. You really find out who's got your back when you really need them. When Death Row was on top, everybody was my friend. Ray J wasn't even old enough to drive yet. I would talk to his mom and she would let him ride out with us. We partied, traveled, and supported each other's careers. But when I moved back to Chicago, Ray J kicked me out of the group and changed the name to Knockout. As tight as we were, no one had my back when I was down and out. At one point, I couldn't get family away from me, but when things got bad, everybody kept their distance. I guess they were scared that I was going to need some help. All of the people that I had helped when I had money were nowhere to be found. Some of my friends went from laughing with me to laughing at me. Once I finally talked to Shug on the phone, he said, "Danny boy, you grown now. You should know what to do." Clearly, I didn't because nothing got better. I was still at home in Chicago on the verge of having nothing. My bank account was running low, and I was sleeping on couches all over the city. I knew that I was wearing out my welcome at some of those places. All of the things that I was used to were no more. The money, friends, and the good times were all gone. I was slowly falling apart at the seams. To make matters worse, the love of my life was falling out of love with me. For a minute, I felt like giving everything up, but I did everything I could to keep moving forward. Trina and I fought and argued every day. She was back living with her mom. I was living in between my sister Orlean and my grandmother's house. I had been so used to death row providing for us, but I knew that it was over. There were a few more phone conversations with Shug, but after a while he cut me off like a bad habit. There was no more communication. He was in San Luis Obispo, California, which was almost 5 hours away from LA. I was in Chicago with no money and no idea of how to get to him. I started going to family members to get them to sponsor my trip. I had been so tired of dealing with the people that Shug had left in charge. Norris was out. Reggie Wright, the owner of Right Way Security, and Michelle became the executives of the company. Reggie and Michelle played off each other so well. He was just as dirty as she had become. I couldn't get any money out of them. When I was old enough to find out about royalties and publishing is when they really changed up on me. When I requested an accounting statement from the office, I received papers that had certain things highlighted on them. 1. Lease for car. I thought it was a gift. 2. Jewelry. Another gift I was paying for. 3. Advances. Some amounts I never knew about. 4. Money Shug sent for my mother's funeral. Who charges someone for bereavement gifts? After number 4, I knew that my loyalty for death row was over. Obviously, I wasn't dealing with people of compassion, empathy, or morals. I couldn't get anything out of them. I knew that Shug didn't know about everything that they were doing at the office, but he did know that they weren't giving me anything, and he knew that I was hungry and had no place to stay. When I found out where they were holding Shug, I started writing him letters. I filled up an entire notepad and sent it to him. In my initial letters, I asked him how he was holding up behind bars. I never wanted to pressure him on paper about what I was going through. I received letters from him, but they never really answered any questions about what to do or how he would help me out of my situation. This dude had adopted me and was supposed to be my dad, but now he had left me stranded. Shug gave me the runaround, but I remained loyal to him. I wrote him a letter expressing how bad I wanted my project to come out and how much I needed to be on stage and share my gift. Most importantly, I wanted to be able to provide for my daughter, Ashley. In the letter, I expressed to him that I thought that it was like old times and that I could talk to him about anything, just like a son could do his father. I asked him to release my song and put the album out. I told Shug that I felt like a bird that sings and is locked in a jar that no one could hear, and if the birdmaster would just open the top to the jar, the world would be able to hear the bird sing. After that letter, he finally called me and asked me if I could come up to see him. He told me that he had me on the list to be able to come and visit, and told me to fill out the paperwork that he had sent me. I filled out the paperwork and sent it in. Some weeks later, I got a letter back saying that my paperwork had been denied due to felonies on my record: transportation of a dangerous substance, auto theft, and unlawful use of a weapon. Something was wrong because I was afraid to even get a traffic ticket. I was advised to take my fingerprints and go to the police department to get a background check. When my rap sheet came back, I had the same charges that I was informed about when I filled out the paperwork. The crimes that I had supposedly committed were in 4 different states. When I went to the sheriff's office, I gave them my fingerprints and other information. They sent me to the magistrate to have the charges removed. The last department I went to was in Crown Point, Indiana. I got there to the station and they said that I had an outstanding warrant for my arrest. I turned myself in, and they compared my weight and picture this time. When I saw the picture, I realized that it was my nephew, Andre. It hurt like hell because he knew that I was trying to make something out of myself. When I went to court that day, the judge dismissed the case and gave clearance for the charges to be removed. I called my grandmother, crying. How could family do this to one another? If you were going to commit a crime, don't use my name. Use a name from a song or a movie or something if you can't own up to your actions. Don't use my shit. I was happy to have handled that situation. It was going to take some months before I could even reapply to go and visit Shug. When I did apply, it took only 30 days before I was approved. I quickly came up with a plan to go out and see Shug. With the help of family and friends, we raised about $1,000, but we needed about $3,000 more for food and lodging. My godbrother, Obi, introduced me to his guy named D. When D found out what I was trying to do, he gave me his brand new, top-of-the-line conversion van and about $2,000 in cash. A week later, my new team and I made the drive from Chicago to California. After making the 5-hour drive to the prison, I was finally able to see Shug. We walked around the track for a while. I could tell that he wanted to say something, but he was trying to protect my feelings. I knew Shug, so I asked him, "For real, be real with me. How come you just stopped talking to me? Why did you cut me off?" He tried to beat around the bush, but then he finally broke down. "Danny boy, I've been in here all this time and you never tried to come see or write me. They told me that you said fuck me and death row," he said. I didn't know what to say to him because he knew better. "You believe that?" I asked him. He knew that I was loyal, but I guess this was just the beginning of him losing who he was. Reggie Wright and all of the others that were stealing and trying to live like Sug while he was locked up were there too. When we got back to where they were, I went off on all of them about the shit they had been talking. They were mad as hell by the end of that visit. Shug asked me to come back in 2 weeks, which meant we had to stay in Cali much longer than planned. The money began running low, but we weren't leaving. I was hoping that our visits would bring about a change. Doug, my security, had left me for public announcement, and a week later, my cousin, whom I had never gotten into it with before, were arguing so bad that I called her a bitch. She hopped on the plane the next morning and left us there. That left Craig, Marcus, and I. We had very little money, and after a 2-month stay in California, we headed back home. When we pulled up on the south side of Chicago, we had $8 left. Marcus and Craig got something to drink, and I got a cigar and a $5 bag. After all the time I had spent back in Cali, Shug still didn't seem to know what was going on in his company. I knew that it was time for me to let go of the past. I would have to make it work on